keep in mind they are sabotaging me because only I make sense, and people acting like weird, crazy corporate slaves these days, and they do not make sense. Before I begin explaining this document, which is partially complete and by itself proves definitively that my war on poverty plan is the only way for America to have some sanity in it from this point on, okay, up until I die, then it just goes completely insane with no valid leaders. Let me explain to you briefly what is the difference between being persecuted for righteousness, which is moral precision, and being persecuted for being a controlled opposition corporate ninny. If you're being persecuted for being controlled opposition, like liberals or conservatives or libertarians, you should be shot as well. And you should be flogged first before you are shot, okay, if you date with that scale. That's an outrage. All right. So the war on poverty justification. 1. A diverse, fair, and moral council is needed to organize my ideas and triple check all financial processes and put them on a website for all to see because I am under extreme sabotage. Obviously, only I can be trusted with leadership because it is crystal clear that my argument is true moral precision, while other people's is mere conformity on a spectrum. And there are other reasons that I should there are other reasons only I should lead the program. And we'll explore that later in the comments. I explore that in my videos. I overkill it a million times over. Anyway, 2, the fair wage doctrine. Okay, for those of you who aren't smart enough to realize I should lead, this is really when you should start paying attention. Okay, exploitation must also be considered. In any given economic system, if people are not paid in a way that is logical and universally fair, then the way wages are paid is not fair and workers are being exploited. How much more are wages unfair in a nation like America with a history that is one of the most prolific, racist, sexist, and rape-filled of any nation? Okay, so basically, let's say I'm doing a job that is worth $100 an hour for good measure. Okay, and I'm getting paid $100 an hour, and other people who make up about 10% of the people who are paid for that job get paid $100 an hour, while everyone else gets paid $5 an hour. Okay, then it is not fair. It is not fair to pay me $100 an hour for that job and to pay them $5 an hour, and the whole system owes those people more money, basically. Okay, that's one example of why I'm right about the fair wage doctrine. Again, in any given economic system, if people are not paid in a way that is logical and universally fair, then the way wages are being paid is not fair and workers are being exploited. How much more are wages unfair in a nation like America with a history that is one of the most prolific, racist, sexist, and rape-filled of any nation? What kind of job discrimination has taken place? What kind of sexual exploitation and extortion? What kind of coercion-based sex, coerced sex occurs? What was the Me Too movement about? And so on. Point number 3. It obviously should be mandatory that there should be no homelessness in a nation as wealthy as America, or the economic system is garbage. There's literally like $60 trillion or so sitting around with the wealthy. Okay, that's just sitting around. We'll get to that and why that is bad. That is very bad for everyone. 4, this plan does not redistribute all the wealth. Okay, the reason why there's typos, I made this in Notepad and not Microsoft Word, and I'm being fumed and sabotaged. We'll get to this later. And that's part of why the system's obviously unfair, right? Am I being paid fairly? No. Okay, I'm being sabotaged for talking about people being paid fairly and for my religious arguments, freedom of speech, and so on and so forth. Anyway, all right. It does not take that much money to eliminate homelessness. Point number 4, this plan does not redistribute all the wealth. It does not redistribute all the wealth. This is not communism. I might very well be the most religious person that ever lived. I do not believe in free love or the abolishment of religion. This is not communism. I do think that organized religions have had a horrible, horrible, horrible effect on society, and that includes the spiritual movements we see on the left and so on and so forth. Okay, but this is not about destroying religion, nor do I want nor is this plan about all the wealth being redistributed. 5, rich people look better, are more mentally healthy, and raise more mentally healthy children when they treat poorer people more fairly. This is obvious. Okay. Point number 6. At this point, asking the rich for $200 on average a month, plus $35,000 on average a year for those worth $4 million or more, is more than affordable. They also have the option to invest their money in savings accounts and real estate, etc., so they can easily still have around as much money as they started with 40 years later. So one thing about having lots of money is once you pass a certain point, of being a millionaire, you can just put money in the savings account and make all kinds of money in interest every year. Okay? You can invest in real estate and make millions of dollars a year. So this is only $35,000 a year on top of the $200 on average, for those with $4 million up. And those with $4 million up, if you have $4 million, you're not paying the full $35,000 a year. You're probably paying like $15,000 a year. Okay? So they're paying like maybe $17,000 a year. In 10 years, that's only $170,000. In 20 years, it's only $340,000 or so. They're paying $340,000, $350,000 in 20 years. Think about it, they could have made millions of dollars with those $4 million in 20 years. So this nowhere near breaks them, and it nowhere near redistributes the wealth. Okay, so again, they also have the option to invest their money in savings accounts and real estate, etc., so they can easily still have around as much money as they started with 40 years later. 7, confusion and obstruction of justice. Pay close attention. Okay? Confusion and obstruction of justice, especially in an organized manner, increases guilt, and therefore how much they logically owe increases. The plan does not force them to pay back what they owe, which is basically everything. When you consider how the system works, the rich have basically gotten over so much that they owe the poor basically everything, and the biggest victims of their treachery basically everything. My father, for example, has been a brain surgeon for over 40 years, and he is not rich, okay, because they exploit and they cheat and they coerce and they set people up to make bad investments, and they have insider trading. They do so much to cheat people that even brain surgeons quite often can find themselves struggling if they're not part of some kind of privileged group, and that is an outrage. Both my parents are doctors, and my family is the most sabotaged family in the world. That is an outrage, and they're sabotaged for righteousness' sake. Okay. 8. Again, the plan does not force them to pay back what they owe, which is everything. To reiterate point number 4, for those people who are going to chop this up to just communism or something, they don't know what they're talking about. 8, it is a time-sensitive situation. Again, this point is very important. Okay? The longer society waits to implement the War on Poverty plan, the more pointless it is, as even their own Bible says in Isaiah 57, that the righteous are taken away to be spared from evil. Okay, if you're really a righteous person with a good heart and you read that in Isaiah 57, do you have kids? No. Okay, unless you're from my family line, which has a moral responsibility to try to help out the rest of the world. No one else can really say that. The average priest can't say that. The average Christian can't say that. They know that they're powerless. But when you're the top martial artist family line ever, you feel a certain moral obligation, okay, to try to stick around for as long as it makes sense, and it will no longer make sense to reproduce after I die for my family. It doesn't make sense for anyone. That's a story for another day. So it's a time-sensitive situation. Again, in case you're confused, the longer society waits to implement the War on Poverty plan, the more pointless it is, as even their own Bible says in Isaiah 57, that the righteous are taken away to be spared from evil. So who's reproducing? Scum. These people are coercing women. They're controlling reproduction to such a degree that the poor are now becoming the offspring of scum. Also in Luke 23, that it says that people are not supposed to reproduce in evil times. Okay, blessed are the childless women, the breasts that never nursed, and the wombs that never bore. So who's having children? Okay, the people who are in cults, the people who are in social clubs, the people who are in corporate groups, the people who are being coerced, the people who don't know any better, the people who are desperate, okay? The people who, whether out of a conscious act, reproduce on a stolen planet, so to speak, or subconsciously. And if you have any questions about that, comment. Okay, I'm running out of time here in this video. So anyway, point number 9: inflation. Inflation increases as there are trillions of dollars sitting around, and the rich are not doing a good job of hiring people and combating inflation in a way that is logical, that reduces poverty and unemployment. So inflation is increasing. If money sits around, it can lose like 97%. It can lose like 3% of its value. Say you have $1 million, okay? And you lose, say you have $300 million, and you lose 3% of its value, right? Then you just lost $9 million, okay? You see what I'm saying? So if they don't put their money into the War on Poverty plan and circulate through the system, their money's going to be devalued because of inflation anyway. I mean, this is a no-brain plan. And don't forget the other point where the rich are more mentally healthy if they treat the poor fairly and they raise children that are more mentally healthy. What do they want to raise children that are mentally ill? They think they're Greek gods or something? That's sick. Anyway, So again, they're not doing a good job as it is of combating inflation and in a way that is logical, that reduces poverty and unemployment and hunger and so on and so forth. Point number 10, trickle-down economics. Trickle-down economics is simply illogical, as we can easily show that jobs will be created with the War on Poverty plan, which will include construction, food programs such as farming and distribution jobs, security and law enforcement, website management and moderators for discussions of plans and analysis of ideas and more. Okay, as we build low-income apartments, managers for those apartments and other jobs as well. Okay. All right. Trickle-down economics gives more money to people who do not put their money to good use. So trickle-down economics gives money to the rich, and they're basically not putting their money to good use for the betterment of people living in America, including immigrants. They simply are a core reason that immigrants are abused. Also, crying about grammar and spelling like a Nazi while people suffer is an outrage. Okay, you have no idea how many times I come across dumbass motherfuckers with no viable counter arguments. You don't know what you're talking about. You know, well, say it properly and say bitch ass shit while I'm being fumed, harassed, and psychological operations are being run on me with over 22 witnesses. Okay, that goes back to the confusion and obstruction of justice. Point number 7, which I would remind you they have no viable counter argument for. Okay, confusing and obstructing justice increases guilt and increases how much you owe logically. Okay, why shouldn't you have to pay more when you're confusing and obstructing justice when I'm trying to bring social, political, economic, and other forms and romantic justice to America? Okay, anyway. They simply are a core reason that immigrants are abused. Also, crying about grammar and spelling like a Nazi while people suffer is an outrage. People should be in prison for hindering my progress and making it harder for me to do things like type this up. This document was created in Notepad and not Microsoft Word. There's no spell or grammar check in Notepad that I know of. Okay, and I have a lot to do. Maybe I overlooked that. Whatever. You see what I'm saying? Okay, if you should be imprisoned for your criminal conspiracy as rich people and their allies, corporate partnerships, social clubs, okay, and you know, for trying to hinder, for obstructing the justice in regards to the exploitation of the workforce and your ill-gotten gains, do you owe everything? You betcha.